Okay, this is a pretty different sort of video and might be of extremely limited interest to anyone who's not me, but I want to talk for a bit about the most recent video I was thinking of making, and why I eventually gave up on it. Nostalgia is a powerful thing, and while I'm not someone who dwells too much on the past and thinks that everything was much better when I was a kid, although it was, I do have a fondness for looking back at the games I played in the 80s and 90s and reminiscing about what my life was like and all the joys that gaming brought me. I guess that's obvious, it's pretty much the reason this channel exists. All of my first videos were about Mega Drive games, and although I've also looked at plenty of more modern games, I've looked at older ones too. A while back I decided that the next game I played for the channel would be The Lucky Dime Caper, a Master System platformer starring Donald Duck. It was one of the first console platformers I ever played, and at the time it was possibly my favourite platformer on the Master System, even ahead of Sonic. And I had a lot of nostalgia for the main character too. I've never been a huge Disney fan, but I did always love the adventures of Donald Duck and his mega-rich Uncle Scrooge. I had a bunch of their comics, not a massive collection by most standards, but they were well loved and well read. And when the DuckTales cartoon came along, it instantly became my favourite TV show.
Life is like a hurricane here in Duckburg. Race cars, lasers, aeroplanes. It's a duck blur. Nights of
With a theme song like that, can you blame me? So, not that long ago, I loaded up the Lucky Dime Caper and started playing. An hour and a half later, as the credits rolled, not that there actually are credits in this game, I was struck by an odd feeling. And that feeling was nothing. I'd just played through a game that I loved as a kid that brought me many hours of happiness, and it had left me cold. In fact, if I felt anything, it was relief that I was done with it. I was disappointed, but not with the game. The game itself was, well, fine. A decent platformer with high production values by the standards of the day, including some very nice animations for Donald, and with gameplay that was solid if ambitious. Exactly what you'd expect from a Disney platformer on the Master System. No, I was disappointed with myself and my inability to appreciate a vintage game. Which might sound silly, and it probably is, but the complete lack of anything that I felt during and after playing genuinely made me think that perhaps I am not, at heart, a real retro gamer. Not that I think anybody should worry about the definition of what a real gamer is in any context, but it was still a bit of a sad realization. It didn't help that, for whatever reason, my Twitter timeline had been filled with retro gamers of all types. And yes, I know it's not called Twitter anymore, but screw that. In any case, every day I was inundated with posts and images of retro gaming stuff, and I'm absolutely fine with that. The reason Twitter kept showing me this stuff was because it's what I'd been interacting with. But there was so much of it. I'd been seeing what seemed like hundreds of photos and consoles and cartridges, cassettes, diskettes, controllers, joysticks, cables, arcade cabinets, instruction booklets, and countless other varieties of gaming paraphernalia, most of it from the 90s or earlier. And everyone posting those videos seemed absolutely thrilled to possess such wondrous items. Every new acquisition was a triumph. Every new bit of obscure tech was a treasure to be, treasured. And, that's great to see. I may never entirely understand the thrill of finding a first-generation Pentium processor, or a particularly rare Taiwanese manufactured 5¼ inch disk drive, but I'm glad that there are people that do. And I always thought that, when it came to games at least, I would always be able to muster a similar enthusiasm. But the Lucky Dime Caper made me realise that I can't. And that's not necessarily a terrible thing, but it still somehow makes me feel like I've lost something. When I see people thrilled to be playing an Atari game from the 80s with simple vector graphics, or plugging a cracked yellowed cartridge of some obscure Japan-exclusive NES game into a console with almost orgasmic glee, I envy them, and I regret that I can never share that particular excitement. Not that I'm immune to the charms of simple acquisition. As a good little capitalist, I love buying stuff, and I often fantasize about the massive game collection I'll inevitably build up when I win lotto or become a YouTube millionaire. Any day now, I'm sure. But what I don't really fantasize about is actually playing all those games. And going through Lucky Dime Caper in its entirety made it clear why I don't. I got not one moment of pleasure from any of its levels, nicely varied as they were. I did not enjoy whacking foes with a mallet, I did not enjoy jumping from platform to platform, I did not enjoy navigating the impressively large and complex final level. But I persevered and I finished the game. Then I tried to write about it. And that turned out to be almost impossible. I just had nothing interesting to say about it. Of course, my inner critic tells me that I have nothing interesting to say about most games, or about anything at all, and quite a few outer critics probably agree with that. But that's never stopped me before. This time, after trying and failing to come up with vaguely amusing ways to describe the first couple of levels, I gave up. I realised that not only did the game leave me cold, I couldn't even muster up an academic interest in it. I do still believe that there's interesting stuff there. It's a good example of early console platformers and it's a solid Disney game, but for me there's just no real appeal. Of course, I have covered other games from that era and enjoyed both playing and writing about them. Even some of the decidedly dodgy Sonic Master System games held my attention long enough for me to crank out a video. But the Lucky Dime Caper demonstrated that, for me at least, just being an old game with a popular main character that I enjoyed as a child was not enough to capture my imagination in the modern day. There needs to be more. I'll never be one of those true retro fans on Twitter for whom age and provenance alone are enough to make a game precious. Even nostalgia is a drug that eventually loses its grip. Why am I saying all this? Well, for one thing, it really was something that I was interested to learn about myself, and while it was a little depressing, it was also kind of liberating. Just because I like a lot of retro games doesn't mean that I have to care about all elements of retro gaming, even ones that were important to me in long ago decades. But it also surprised me just how envious I was of those people who still feel truly passionate and excited about all things gaming, especially retro gaming. And maybe other people can identify with this, so perhaps it's worth sharing. Also, it's kind of an explanation as to why my motivation to keep this channel going is so up and down. Sometimes I find games I really want to talk about, but sometimes, despite my best efforts, I just don't have anything to talk about at all. And it's also an indication as to why I may be considering doing a wider range of videos going forward, stuff like this where I talk about general concepts instead of specific games. I'm not sure if anyone will care, but if I cared about what people cared about, I'd have given up on YouTube quite some time ago. Of course, I could decide tomorrow that I want to cover every Commodore 64 game ever made. I'm nothing if not changeable. Anyway, thanks for watching. Now get off my lawn.